Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Financial First Aid. At Financial First Aid, we help entrepreneurs that have dealt with bankruptcy go from bankrupt to bank and help them just deal with the whole issue of bankruptcy and help them move on beyond that whole episode of their lives and get them to a place where they're actually thriving and not just surviving. And so today I have Karl Sona, who is one of the founding members of Streamline Media. I actually am the one of the customers of Streamlined Media. They do my podcast production. So Karl is one of the four members, founding members of the company. But Karl also has background in real estate investing. He's been an entrepreneur for a good portion of his life. And I just really want to discuss with him some great things that he has going on. He has NCG Capital, which is a Black-owned LLC and investment group. And I just would really look forward to getting him into discussing all of the things that he's working on right now. And hopefully, Financial First Aid will be able to give people an enlightening information about how we can all work better together in terms of supporting the Black-owned businesses. So welcome, Karl. How you doing today?
Hey, thank you, Vera. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm doing great. Just getting ready for a big week ahead. You know, we got 4th of July coming up, and
Yes.
I got a family wedding to go to. So I'm excited to plug in with you and then hopefully take some of this good energy into the weekend.
Same here. I'm going to a wedding tomorrow myself.
Awesome.
Yeah, what a coincidence. Hopefully both of the weddings that we're going to, the couple will stay together forever.
God willing.
Yes, indeed. So, Karl, please give us a little bit more information about yourself and what you do.
Yeah. So I always start with, my backstory, which is I am the son of 2 immigrant parents from West Africa, a small country called Cameroon. And I'm very proud of that, right? Because I know my history. I know what it took for my parents to get here. And I think having a deeper understanding of where I come from and what it's like for most people is what really propels a lot of my desire to tap into, my utmost potential. And so I think that's where a lot of the entrepreneurial aspirations come from. But parents immigrated from Cameroon, as I said, in the late 80s and really were in search of a better life for themselves and for their family, that being me. So I am a direct recipient of a lot of their hard work. And when they came here, they really didn't know their left from their right, Vera. They really did not. And so being a young boy, I watched them, make a lot of mistakes. I don't have very many memories of me with both of my parents together at the same time, because I was with one as the other was, working a night shift, or with one as the other was going to school.
Exactly.
So from a very early age, I just saw that, hard work compounds, consistency compounds.
Yes.
And, if you have a mind set on achieving something and you are willing to be resilient, oftentimes you can reach that goal if it is a God-destined goal. And so an early goal for me was actually a dream of my father's. My father got to America by negotiating a deal with my great-grandfather, whom I'm named after. We call him Karl. He's since passed on. But he negotiated a deal with my great-grandfather that if he sponsored him to come to America, that he would go on to medical school. Oh. So my great-grandfather had made some money in real estate back home in our village, and he was just a very stingy and stubborn man. So that was the only way my dad could get him to stroke a check. And one thing led to another. When my father came here, he was not able to go to medical school. He actually found himself down a path of entrepreneurship. And so my dad was an entrepreneur before it was really a cool or glorified thing to be an entrepreneur. But I think through all of the instability growing up, some successes, a lot of failures, failures, he passed that on to me. And I think he was really more so wanting me to, lead a stable life and really carry that baton on. So it wasn't until, venturing down that path during my college years where I realized that wasn't what I really wanted to do either. And so that led to some really difficult conversations. But it ultimately landed me in the startup medical device world, where I grew sales teams for a number of years. And I would say it was in that corporate career where I really started to learn about the importance of wealth generation, wealth creation, and not relying solely on a W-2 job as a vehicle to do that, but more so using that as a tool to invest in passive assets that could pay me, without having to be tied, to a particular location or whatever the case may be. So that's a little bit of how I've gotten to where I am. Obviously, I've kind of given you an abbreviated timeline there, but hopefully that helps the listeners understand where I'm coming from.
Now, one other thing, you said both your parents came here from Cameroon. I have some friends of mine that are from Cameroon and they speak French. Were your parents bilingual or did they have to learn the language?
Parents were bilingual. Yeah.
Oh,
so my parents grew up in the southwest part of Cameroon, which is actually, we call it Anglophone or English speaking. So English is what they speak regularly. Granted, when we're talking amongst each other, we speak something called Pidgin English, which is kind of like broken English. If you can imagine, how like Jamaicans speak, it's kind of something like that.
Hold on 1 minute. Hold on 1 minute. All right, go ahead, please.
So they are bilingual and they are also French speaking as well too, since that was taught in the schools back home.
Oh, okay, great. And so they knew formal French and they knew, what was it called? Kind of English?
Pidgin English. Yeah, which is just kind of, like broken down English. Here in America, we might call it Ebonics. You know what I mean? Like that, it's that kind of a concept.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Fine.
Yeah.
So you were explaining how you kind of transitioned from doing the corporate thing. How long were you in the corporate world?
Yeah, I was in the corporate world for about 8 years and I was with a very good company. Like I said, after figuring out that medical school was not going to be my path at that time, I didn't really know anything about starting companies. I didn't know anything really about real estate investing. I just knew that I had to go out into the workforce and get a good job so that I could pay back my loans and live well, right? And so for me, the primary industry at that point in time that caught my attention was healthcare. I had a keen understanding of healthcare because I was studying it from a undergraduate perspective, and then I loved technology. So I actually got a degree in radiation therapy, believe it or not. And so going through clinical rotations and shadowing therapists that were delivering cancer treatment, I realized that there was a glass ceiling that capped a lot of those people at a certain level. And so I thought to myself, like, oh God, I can't go get a job for $30 an hour and expect to really tap into that potential that I knew I had harnessed within me. So, what do most people do? Most people hop back into school. And that's what I did. I went back for a graduate program and got a master's in something called molecular imaging and therapeutics, which is just a fancy way of saying personalized cancer imaging and research to be able to put patients on, I guess you could say, better clinical, therapeutic regimens for a variety of different cancers in the body. And that's when I was introduced to medical device. There's a whole industry out there of manufacturers that create cutting edge technologies that hospitals and physicians use to treat an array of different, diseases. So I was fortunate enough to find a startup company where I came on as a very early stage employee. And again, through hard work and determination, started to see myself climbing that corporate ladder. And about a couple of years ago, we just sold that company for several $100 million. So that was my trajectory through corporate.
Oh, wow. Okay. And were you able to capitalize off of being a part of the company as a startup?
I was. So I had equity, but I will tell you this, and this is no shade or no disrespect to the organization or the leadership team there. When I learned what my equity was worth compared to the C-suite executives or the board of directors, or even some of, obviously, the very early venture firms that backed us, it was literally peanuts compared to what they took home. And again, that's how equity works, right? But I didn't understand that very early on. And so all these years, Vera, where I'd been, a top performing salesperson, year after year. And I'd been recognized in the organization as a rising star and called upon to actually teach and train the rest of the sales force. You know, I've been making very good income, but none of that was translating really to my ownership within the organization. And that's really where true wealth is created. So when I saw that upon the exit and several other companies began knocking down at my door, I found myself at a crossroad, and I was like, you know, I understand how this game works. You know, being an employee is a great way to leverage a company and to obviously build your career, but I'm out for wealth creation. You know, I know where my parents come from. I know how hard it is for people like them to make it in this country. And truth be told, I feel like I have a personal responsibility and an obligation to take where it is they've gotten us and capitalize and take it to a whole nother dimension for future generations, right? That's just how I personally feel. So I didn't see working a job as a viable way to do that, considering the talents that I know that I possess. And so that's when I decided to break away from the corporate thing altogether and figure out entrepreneurship with real estate investing as my vehicle to wealth creation for myself and for my family.
Okay, great. And so what would you tell someone who is on that kind of the trajectory that you were on, and then they say, okay, this isn't the path that's going to lead me to be able to create the kind of wealth that I want to do. And so I have either a skill set that I can develop and offer that as a service, or I have a product that I can, create. And so what would you tell, someone who's kind of got an entrepreneurial idea, but doesn't know quite what to do with it?
Yeah, this is a great question, because when I was in corporate making several $100,000 a year,
right,
you know, I kind of believed that I was the man. You know, I kind of believed that like my stuff didn't stink. And so I started to really put myself on a pedestal, and a lot of my time was solely focused on working the job, making the money, but there wasn't much else happening outside of the job to further the dollars I was making. And so when you're not assigning your dollars towards an entrepreneurial idea or towards an asset like real estate that you can invest in, what happens with those dollars? They get bored and they end up becoming poorly utilized, if you know what I mean by that, right?
Exactly.
And so, and so it took me a little while to realize that, and this is where the whole podcasting thing came from, because I was talking to so many of my peers who were like, man, you've made it. Like you're making all this money, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, little do you know, man, like I'm actually trying to figure out how I can create something that pays me, right? Something that I have full ownership over. And what I decided to do was, so many people were coming to me, talking to me about their grand plans. You know, a lot of young professionals working pretty good jobs, but I would see how they would spend their time, and it would be at the club or chasing women or whatever. And those things are not bad in and of themselves, but if that's all you're doing, how do you expect to go to where you want to go? Right. So I started this podcast in 2018. It was my first actually my second podcast. It was called the Free Time Podcast. And the whole idea behind it, Vera, was for me to try to help people to really audit how they were spending their time, and to look at time as an asset, where if you are able to learn a skill, if you're able to learn how to invest, if you're able to cultivate whatever it is you're good at and turn it into a business, you can actually leverage that as an asset to go to where it is you want to go, right? And so to pull this in full circle and to answer your question, I would encourage everybody that's at a high paying job, meaning you're making north of $80,000 a year, think about how you can put some of that money that you are trading time for. How can you take that money and create an asset, right? AKA a business, or invest in an asset, learn to do that in a way that will help you meet or exceed what it is you're currently making at your full-time job. Because when you can meet or exceed where you're currently at, or even set a more simple way, if you can create a flow of income that meets your expenses, right? You're technically financially free. One of my good friends, Maurice Philogene, he's a retired corporate guy. He's a big real estate guy. he talks about this. He's like, so many people think that they need like millions to be financially free. Really, you just need a stream of passive cash flow that meets or exceeds your expenses. And then you really can show up to your job. You know, you don't have to be there. You have a lot more options at your fingertips. And the funny thing that happens when you're empowered and you have more options is you actually perform better because you're there by choice, not by necessity. So my advice would be to anybody that's at that, you know, sort of crossroads. Be at your job by choice. Figure out a way to be at your job by choice, not necessity.
Wow. That is fantastic insight. Just right there. That's a great nugget right there. So what led you into the whole real estate investing piece? Why did you like choose that as your vehicle?
Yeah, you know, because I understand it. You know, I do invest in the stock market. We have a company, NGC Capital, where we study the market and we pull money and we do that whole thing. But while the stock market has, you know, performed historically speaking better than any other asset class, it still feels like you're just investing in paper in some company that you can't really, you know, force value in, if that makes any kind of sense. Whereas a piece of real estate, you know, depending on the area, depending on what's going on in the area, you can look at the market and find a distressed asset that you know you can force appreciation to, right? And the type of assets I invest in are typically workforce housing assets. So these are the types of you know, real estate properties that are typically going to stay full, you know, in good times in the economy and certainly in bad times, because when people get hit, they typically trade down, right? And at the end of the day, everybody needs a place to live. So that just made sense to me. And on top of that, I grew up around real estate investing. So my father, when we moved from DC, where I grew up, to Milwaukee, very quickly became savvy to opportunities to leverage FHA loans to buy duplexes and fourplexes and things of that nature that were technically still you know, attainable through residential loans and not commercial loans. So we very quickly, you know, ramped up a little portfolio in and around Milwaukee. But the funny thing, Vera, is that when I was growing up, my dad always put me to work, right? So I was the, you know, the property manager. I was dealing with tenants, toilets, and termites and all of that. And so while it was cool to have these physical buildings that were paying him, not me, him, cash flow, I just always saw it as like a second job. You know, I could tell you so many horror stories from across the years with tenants, because we were buying in like Class D areas, which, for, you know, people that maybe aren't familiar with real estate, this thing like the hood, you know, in the inner city. And so, but it wasn't until 2016 or so when I moved to Nashville, Tennessee. Again, I was climbing the corporate ladder of my corporate career, and it landed me in Nashville, that I met an ex-girlfriend now. And her dad was a normal guy that came from very humble beginnings, that had been able to retire at the age of like 48 through real estate. So in getting to know him and their family, he put me on game about how you could actually, you know, create syndicates or pools of people that could take down really large properties, you know. So where we were investing in like, you know, 2 doors at a time, 4 doors at a time, he was investing in like 500 doors at a time. And whenever I would see that, I always thought like, oh, that's like, you know, institutional money, or that's Wall Street that owns those properties. And really, it's not the case. And so through, you know, multifamily real estate syndicates and things of that nature, my eyes became open about what was possible. And the really nice thing about doing more doors versus fewer is that your economies of scale are a lot stronger, right? So you don't have to be there. It doesn't have to be a job of you collecting the rents manually. You can put a property management company in place that can handle that and still really see some nice appreciation, long-term speaking, with cash flow, you know, during the interim of you holding that asset. So all of that just started to make sense for me. And that's why I chose it as an asset class that I wanted to learn more about and to really become more serious about.
So you explained how, you know, you would recommend entrepreneurs to go from or wannabe entrepreneurs go from their, you know, really decent paying jobs, transition into you know, being an entrepreneur or an investor, and doing it in such a way that once you know your kind of your side gig or your idea can actually support you financially, that's when you kind of know that's the time to launch.
It could be. And for some folks, they are totally happy double dipping. I mean, I know a lot of successful folks in their 40s, in their 50s that are still making several $100,000 a year and have amassed real estate portfolios, north of 300-400 doors.
Mm-hmm.
And they're fine doing that because, again, they're there by choice, not necessity.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I've just always had this dream of being an operator, like full in operator. And it's mostly because I want to be able to control my own destiny.
Right.
I don't want somebody coming and tapping me on the shoulder after they just applauded me, ripping the carpet from underneath me because it's time for layoffs. Right. Now, certainly that doesn't hurt as much if you are leveraging your time to create an asset or to create passive streams. Certainly It doesn't hurt as much, but I've just always had this dream of being an owner operator and more so from the standpoint of being able to teach others like me, others that look like me, how to do that. So that's why I decided a couple of years ago at age 30 that this was going to be a good time for me to really, go narrow and deep in this space and learn how to build companies from nothing, to where you can sell them for a very healthy profit and turn around and do it again. So that was just a decision that I felt was appropriate for myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to be very clear that I'm not anti-job. I actually think that a job can be a good thing.
Right. No. And I love the way you explained that, you were in the corporate space for a good, 8 years or however long it was. But that whole corporate experience actually helped you to develop a real, I guess I should say, a real taste for understanding how the corporate world works.
Yeah.
You saw that you had put in a lot of time and energy and effort into someone else's company. And then you figured, wow, and I only got whatever it was when they sold that. But now if I own it myself and I develop it myself, I can do the same thing they did, but I learned from that experience. And
exactly.
So let's talk about that a little bit. How some people are like, okay, well, I hate the corporate world, and I think corporations are evil and blah blah blah. Yeah, they're working for a corporation and they're making 6-figure incomes, whatever that 6-figure number is. They're living a comfortable life, but they're still kind of beating up on the corporations. Yet, if they think about what it is they're doing, like you said previously, and learn how to really leverage their time and their effort, they might actually be able to become a corporation. How do you respond to that?
I love what you just said there. I love what you just said about them becoming the corporation. Like, that is a huge mental shift that I think falls on deaf ears for a lot of people. I was just having a conversation with one of my good friends. I mean, he's killing it in the software sales world, but he called me a couple months ago and he's like, man, my boss's boss just left. So it sounds like there's gonna be some opportunities to like rise the ranks, and they're dangling that little carrot to keep me around. But, I'm spending 3 out of 5 days on the golf course. Like, on paper, it looks good, but I really feel like complacency is setting in, And so what he was describing to me is what I refer to as the golden handcuffs. When they pay you, when they pay you so much that like the opportunity cost to leave is just too high. Like, it's perceived as being too high, even though you might feel like you're incongruent or out of alignment, right? With yourself.
But you're getting paid a 6-figure salary. You might be, hey, I'm doing good, and I don't want to let that go.
Exactly. And that's understandable. But this is where people need to look at themselves as a corporation.
There you go. Yep.
As a company, right? Because Vera, I mean, you run a company, I run a company. If your company is making healthy revenues and it's tied to healthy profit margins, but you can maybe, triple or quadruple that next year, what are you going to do?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
What should you do?
But
the golden handcuffs thing is awful tempting.
Right. Like what a business owner would say, all right, if I know I can triple my business next year in terms of growth, what do I need to put in place to attain that so that next year we meet or exceed that growth goal, right? They wouldn't say, oh, I'm good just being here.
Right.
A business owner wouldn't do that, right?
Right.
But what happens for so many people in the employee mindset is they become conditioned to taking what they're given.
True.
Right. And even if it is a very high wage, I mean, this friend of mine is making something with a 6 in front of it and it's got, 6 figures. I mean, he's making a lot. Even if it is a high wage, again, like once I challenged him on switching from that employee to corporation mindset, he's like, oh, wow. Yeah. Like the business owner. Yeah. The business owner would do what is in the best interest and in the health of the company to get to that next level. And the funny thing that happened was literally just a couple of weeks ago, another startup in his space reached out and they put a really nice piece of equity in front of him in terms of options. And, they laid out all the different incentives. And now he's actually thinking about doing something despite feeling internally conflicted, like he owes his company something. And I was like, hey, listen, think about it from a business owner's perspective. If all of a sudden they had to scale back, yeah, they got a personal relationship with you, but I'm sure they wouldn't at the end of the day have a difficult time deciding to scale back on your salary or cutting you all together if it was what was in the best interest of the company. Exactly. So I try to help people understand that you are an asset, and right now companies have been hurting for talent. I have companies that we consult with that are coming to us saying, what can we do to be more attractive? What can we do to demonstrate that we are an inclusive workforce and we have got a good culture? And why is it that they're thinking about all these things? It's because they're hurting for talent. And I just wish more employees understood what
their value was, right? Exactly.
Can be to these organizations, and so we need to have more transparent conversations there. So that's what I would say about that.
So you're NCG Capital, is that right?
NGC Capital.
NGC Capital
stands for no glass ceilings. No glass ceilings.
Nice, very nice. Yeah. How did you come about developing that?
Oh yeah, so it's really myself and now 9 other managing members. When we started in 2016, officially incorporated in 2017, it was just 6 of us, and 6 brothers and sisters. We're all of African descent. We were all living in Atlanta, Georgia at the time. And we just realized, again, being very early and young in our corporate jobs, that nobody was coming to save us. Many of us had the little 401ks or the Roth IRAs, but nobody in our families had ever really taught us about stock market investing or how to get, involved with angel investing or how we could crowdfund dollars to do real estate deals. But these were all things that we had interest in. So we said, hey, why don't we come together and form a little company where we can use this as a think tank, so to speak, to leverage each other's networks, to leverage each other's skill sets and knowledge base, and more importantly, leverage each other's capital, each other's working capital. So we would actually, buy into this LLC in exchange for ownership shares, and then use that money to deploy that capital to, buy equities in the stock market or to take down cryptocurrency opportunities, et cetera. So it's now, evolved into this family, I would say. It's more than a business partnership. We're a family. We all meet at least twice a year in person. Actually, this wedding I'm going to tomorrow is one of my brothers from NGC Capital that's getting married. And, we meet twice a year to review our portfolio, to really outline strategy going forward. But the thing we're really passionate about, aside from creating wealth for, the Black and African diaspora community, is we are really excited about creating a model or a template for how people of color can actually come and work together to influence and create wealth creation in their own communities. Nice. I mean, literally every Sunday we meet for an hour and a half, saying, hey, did you see this article? Did you, what's happening with Tesla? What's happening with our investments here? Hey, who do you know that's looking for capital that, might have an interesting opportunity for us? And then we actually do due diligence on these opportunities. We practice pitching these opportunities. So there is so much growth happening in this community of friends. And the best part is we still have fun together too. So we are excited because we have 10 Class A members, and the Class A members are the ones that have voting interests. as well as equity in the company. But we are now exploring opening up a new round of membership, and that's called Class B membership. So this would be for individuals, again, people of color that have an interest in becoming more sophisticated investors, or they have an interest in learning how to invest in different types of assets other than just their retirement plans, right? And so there'll be an opportunity for them to come on, for them to get access to our deals. We have 3 or 4 people in the company that actually are startup founders. And the really cool thing about being a startup founder is that you go through all these different accelerators and incubators where you meet other exciting startups that are looking to revolutionize their category or their industry. So we're now seeing more startups coming to us saying, hey, throw in 10 to 20,000. We're getting ready to raise a Series A round. If you come in the pre-seed, that 10 to 20,000, come time to raise our Series A, it could be worth 100,000. You know what I mean? So it's really cool. And we want to be able to open up and democratize these opportunities for others that would like to get in. So that's NGC Capital. I oftentimes joke and I say, wow, that group of folks are my board of directors. They are like my internal confidants for like my life going forward. So I've just been really humbled and just really grateful that I was where I was in 2016 in Atlanta, to meet a lot of those folks and just, forge those bonds that continue on till this day.
That's wonderful. So at the end of my podcast, I always ask if you could give us one thing that would inspire my listeners, educate my listeners, and motivate my listeners. What would you say to my entrepreneur listeners to inspire them?
Wow, that's a loaded question. Inspire, motivate, and educate. Wow.
You can take them in any order you'd like.
Okay. So one thing for each of those. Got it. Well, educate, this is my first market downturn, AKA recession that we're seemingly heading into. And so I think that, these times, while seemingly scary and very daunting, are truthfully times where a lot of people, historically speaking, have created a lot of wealth.
Excellent. Yep, that's absolutely correct.
So I would challenge people, especially those that maybe are watching a lot of CNN or whatever and that are super scared, to just wonder, what if it didn't have to be a scary time, and what if they could learn a couple of things about investing that could help them add an additional zero onto their net worth. So that just comes down to educating yourself and deciding that you are going to be active, not passive, during these rocky times that we're heading into, because the market will correct and bounce back, and there will be good days ahead again, and hopefully you'll find yourself on the other side in a much better position. So that's something that I'm challenging myself to think about right now on the educational side. On the inspirational side, hey, listen, nothing is promised. One of the things that I think about a lot, and sometimes when I say it, it sounds kind of morbid, is that we're all not here forever. Like, we're all going to die and pass away. And for many people that can be jarring, but for some that lean into it, it can actually be an accelerant, because when you think about, the number of people that have been losing their lives over the past couple of years with the pandemic, even,
exactly,
you have to kind of wonder what you're put here to do.
Right.
And is it just to stay small and to stay average and to stay mediocre, or to allow your fears that maybe aren't really even real to continue to dominate you and control where you are and to keep you from getting to where you'd like to go? Or is it to lean in, right? And to humble yourself to the fact that you're not here forever, and to really become curious about why God put you here and how you can fulfill that greater vision for your life, right? And so that takes a lot of intentionality. That takes a lot of searching. But I find that when you can become a little bit more in tune with your mortality, and I know it sounds cheesy, but live as if you only had a year to go or whatever.
Right.
I can only wonder how much you could achieve, not just for yourself, but for those around you that you care about, or maybe even people that you don't know about. So I would have that on the inspiration side. I think your last one was motivate, right?
Yeah, motivate. Yes.
Motivate. Ah, man, this is a good one. You know, motivation is only as good as you'll take it, right? Like motivation is a very fleeting thing for me, truthfully. When I was coming up, I was always into motivational talks and this and that and the other. But what I will say, and this is one motivational talk that has always stuck with me to this day, is Steve Harvey. He's somebody I look up to. During one of his tapings on Family Feud, he stopped mid-production and he posed a question to the audience. And the question was somewhere along the terms of, you know, you ever wonder how those people in your life, or maybe the people you see on TV, you ever wonder how it is, it just seems that they're just like soaring, you know, uninterrupted while you're stuck where you are. Well, understand that each and every one of those people, they all at one point in time made a decision to jump. You know, said another way, they were willing to let go of that proverbial ledge of life that we all hang on to for dear life. And they just jumped. And they understood that when they jumped, that at some point in time, a parachute would have to open. Because again, this is a promise from God in the Bible. A parachute would have to open that would deploy and allow them to soar. But when they jumped, they fell.
They
And
were falling, yes.
maybe they fell for a while and they got banged up and bruised up and whatnot. But at some point, like they just knew, and they had absolute conviction of mind and heart that that parachute would deploy, and that it would allow them to soar to levels that maybe they never once even knew possible while they were on the lower ledge of life. So that's a piece of motivation. Again, looking at a guy like Steve Harvey, who has been homeless and lived in his car and all these different things, and then seeing where he's at today, regular dude,
right,
that I listen to from a motivational perspective, that get me to realize, okay, you know what? This is how the game works. At some point, I got to get into the arena, and that requires that jump. So that's my piece of motivation.
I love it. Motivate,
Helps.
educate. I think you touched on all three. So how can people get in touch with you, Karl? And I know you have a podcast as well.
Yes. I have a podcast called Dear Black CEO. So Dear and then BLK CEO. And so we talk to a lot of entrepreneurs of color that were once in corporate America, but that have actually made that jump we just talked about. And we're really trying to understand what that process looks like, and how they think about growing a scalable and profitable business. So if that's you, there's tons of great content there that you can listen to. And that's available on all places where you'd go to find a podcast. People can also feel free to check me out on my personal website. So that's www.karlsona.com, Karl with a K, KarlSona.com. And I have a little bit of information, you know, about who I am there and what personally motivates me. And then I'm very active on social media. I would say the two that I'm most active on are LinkedIn. So again, just Karl Sona, as well as Instagram. So at Karl.Sona. And if you're needing any help with, I would say, growing the brand presence of your company online, we do have a company called Streamline Podcasts, where we help companies as well as individuals develop, produce, and distribute content through podcasts. So I'd be happy to talk with you about how that could be something that could also help you gain more visibility online so you can attract more customers into your company.
Thank you so much for your time, your insight, your wisdom, telling your story, letting people know that, hey, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Vera.
I so appreciate it. And hopefully I'll get to have you on another time. I look forward to it. And we can explore even more information.
We can. We can go narrow and deeper next time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Karl.
Yeah.
Bye now.
Bye.